Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon in the framework of this M+ Vision Biomedical Conference for Innovation. Julio, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the chance of sharing some time with you. I'm a very big fan of M+ Vision since the very beginning. When I first met Martha 4 years ago in Madrid, first as a regional minister consejero de Sanidad de la Comunidad de Madrid, and she first talked to me about this initiative. Then she was working with the Consejería de Educación to make it happen, and then I met Martha some months later when I have stepped out of politics in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and she told me that everything was going okay, and 3 years later what I see is not just a lot of fellows really well trained, after spending some time in Madrid's hospitals in a process of needs finding, and then coming back to Boston, and then to Madrid, and evolving in their research projects. But I see a big impact on the healthcare system, a lot of people engaged, and a lot of people trying to change their mindsets and to make the most of our healthcare system. It is a pleasure also to present this case. This is the RGA case, Rehabilitation Gaming System case. It is a case written by Professor Peter Bryan. He's a professor of entrepreneurship at the business school, and he was an entrepreneur himself. He was involved in launching several startups based on technology and science in his home country, Australia, and then he decided to devote his life to academics, and he came to a business school. And then we met this wonderful team, Karma and Paul. Paul is the chief scientist officer of a lab called SPECS in Universidad Pompeu Fabra, and Karma is the director of the Technology Transfer Office. And first I proposed them to work together for a period of time in a project, an open business plan competition we are running every year in partnership with Accenture called Passionie. And after that, we proposed them to write the case of RGS. It is a case that describes a situation that many of you may be facing, and if you are not facing that situation, I hope many of you have the chance to face it in the future, a situation in which a team of researchers decide to found a spin-off, a startup coming out from the technology and the science they have been working on. And of course, you face pretty similar problems. The goals of commercially motivated investors, as a few minutes ago was described, are not exactly the same than those goals of the teams of researchers. There is a contrast, and there could be a potential conflict between the norms and the incentives and the interest of scientists and commercial motivated investors. You have to balance a financial, social, and of course scientific risk in technology commercialization, especially in those projects based on highly innovative technology. And you need to align all of those goals, the goals of the team of researchers, scientific goals, and the commercial goals to make it happen. As Paul usually says, and it is described very well in the case, that he is going to present to you himself, because Paul is here. Please, Paul, I don't know if you put your presentation on. It is on your computer, and is there a way of? Oh, okay, perfect. Please, come. It is a pleasure to introduce you to Paul. And as Paul usually says, when he's asked about the potential conflict between commercial interest and scientific interest, he usually says that for specs, the labs he managed, market is not a conflict for science. Market is, can be the validation of science and technology. So Paul, please share with us your insights about technology transfer and explain us what RGS is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
An applause, a warm applause for...
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. So good afternoon. Thank you, Juan, for the nice introduction. Great for inviting us. Thank you. So I'm here with some of my team members, so Carmen Buisson and Christian Moscardi. And I want to talk with you about our adventure to translate an idea we had about 10 years ago into a product that can be commercialized. That's not really en route of being commercialized, but there are, of course, as usual, many hurdles in front of us that we try to tackle in sort of a systematic way. So I'm an ICREA research professor at Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona for the last 8 years, and I think ICREA is a great system, and I can highly recommend it to you. So this is really what we're talking about. So here we have a stroke survivor. He's at home working independently with a computer system on which we have a virtual reality environment running, in which this human is performing tasks. This is the product we're trying to commercialize. It's called the Rehabilitation Gaming System, and I'm going to describe to you what brought us to this point. Now, the point is, of course, you can say, well, okay, technology, virtuality, that's great. We should use these kinds of things. But the point is, how do you use this to have impact? And that is not necessarily a trivial problem to solve. Okay? So I'm going to focus on the 4 steps we went through to get to this point, which is on the one hand, the idea, what was the background of the idea, what was also the ambition that we built on that basis, then what was the science that we brought to bear to realizing this idea and building it into a technology, and how are we now generating impact, right, in society. So this was actually how it all started 12 years ago in a big 180 square meter space in Neuchâtel, where we deployed an exhibition called ADA. It is the world's largest interactive space ever built so far. And ADA was visited by about 500,000 people over a period of 6 months. This was my project, and it was part of the Swiss National Expo of 2002. But just in doing this, for rather different reasons, we discovered that these interactive media systems, of which ADA is an example, were incredibly effective in interacting with people with different kinds of handicaps. People that might be blind or deaf or mentally incapacitated partially, or people who might come in a wheelchair. We realized that these interactive media systems actually built a whole new language of interaction. It was very effective. So that got us to think, how do we now build on this? How do we translate this into something that can really be used in society? So we also worked there with H.R. Giger. I want to mention him. He's a great artist. He just passed away a month ago. Also worked on the Alien series, as you might know. But also Giger expresses very much a link that we cherish a lot doing science, which is the link to art. Right? So I think there's a very natural transfer between science and art helping us explore boundaries. And similarly, I think there's a very natural linking to market and commercialization. And I think, and this is also going to be one of my conclusions, I feel that right now the models we apply to this are too much imposing barriers between these different domains of human activity. So how do we get from the idea to an RGS product, right? So, well, we have to define your target, right? Where are we going to have impact in society specifically? In a way, that's of course where also the neurosis of the scientist comes in a way that impact is measurable, right? Not that you have to wave your hands and say, oh, it's awesome. If you go to Silicon Valley, everything's awesome, right? But if you ask, why is it awesome? Actually, people often don't know. It's just because they believe it's awesome, and that we are scientists, so we want to know why something is awesome. So for that, you need a clear target. You need to then to define the content of the system you want to build. to actually have that impact on the target. And you have to think about your validation and subsequently then this step to societal impact. And of course, this continuous concern, how do you then really finance all these steps and these operations? I think we have by now an answer to these different steps with respect to the rehabilitation gaming system. And this is what I would like to share with you. So our target became stroke. Why stroke? Well, there are a number of reasons of this. It's the main cause of adult disability. Okay, so that means the number of people. So here we have a very recent paper from The Lancet where they give an overview of the impact of stroke on the world population. And the numbers are just staggering. And they're increasing. And they're specifically increasing in the developing world. Okay, so we're talking about millions and millions of stroke survivors. Yearly, we have about 17 million new cases. We have a chronic stroke population, about 33 million. There are about 6 million fatalities, which often can also be the result of secondary incidents, right? Secondary strokes. And the overall loss of disability-adjusted life years, so this is a measure of, let's say, quality of life, is 102 million. Okay, these are huge numbers. And so that means effectively we have about 40 million people worldwide who need care as a result of stroke. Are we providing that care really today? No. If you have a stroke, you will be effectively treated in the standard medical system for, let's say, up to half a year. In Spain, the health system would spend about 4,500 euros on you for therapy, recovery, but after that it's done. Okay, you're sent home, you consider the chronic patient who is beyond further treatment. Okay, this is the current situation. And I think this is really quite a problem. So it's expensive because a lot of therapy interventions depend on humans. Humans are expensive. Okay, then you have big logistical problems. Patients for therapy have to go to centers, they need transportation, they're incapacitated, you need an ambulance. Very practical problems we're facing. Okay, so that means the sustainability of the current models we use to support this stroke population, and I'm not even talking about people with, let's say, traumatic brain injury, which is sort of a related set of symptoms. Okay, so the whole group is much larger. It's clear that this is not sustainable. So by 2030, stroke will be the main cause of loss of quality of life. Already today, our medical systems cannot handle this deluge of stroke patients. Okay, so forget about using this in the future. So as far as we're concerned, we are facing a health crisis here. This is not something we should underestimate. Okay, and so there's some work to be done. So that's why we took stroke as our target. It's a huge group of patients who need care, but compared to other deficits of the nervous system, it's a relatively well-defined set of symptoms you can target. So we have measurability of impact, which is really important. So I don't just say, oh, it's awesome. No, we can measure it. So the science. Well, this is the research group I lead. So we're about 30 people doing research, what scientists do. But if you look at the backgrounds of different people, you see it's a highly multidisciplinary environment. And I think that's also what you need to sort of be effective in translating these kinds of ideas into marketable products. In our case, you need people who think about the brain, but also people who think about design, or who think about interface development, or about human factors, or about psychological assessment. So multidisciplinarity, I think, is key for success in these domains. But then, if you look at the structure of this group, you also see you have hierarchies. It's not that different from a small company, right? So we have a CEO, which happens to be me, but then we have our chief technology officer, a chief financial officer, who's Karma there, our chief communications or media officer, okay, so marketing officer. So that means these research groups and the way they operate become more and more like small businesses. And it can be fairly effective business. We have generated, with this business, 6.5 million euros, okay? So these things run like little businesses. So in that sense, the whole idea of also commercializing our ideas and as RGS is not completely foreign, because we have to operate like entrepreneurs to be effective as scientists. So how to get to the science? Now, if you get a stroke, which I hope you won't get, but there are two things that will happen to you in the clinic. Either you get a form of therapy that looks like this, okay? So you have someone who is sort of manipulating your periphery, your skeletal muscle system, physiotherapy, right? Or you get occupational therapy. You might have to stack blocks on each other or move something from one box to the next and so on, certain tasks, okay? But if you post a very simple question, like where's the theory that explains that this helps my brain, that effectively has a hole in it, because that's what stroke means, it's just a hole in your brain, a whole bunch of neurons are gone. What helps my brain to recover, okay, doing this? There's no causal link anywhere in the literature to be found, okay? So what we do today in the clinic is more a habit than grounded on a real understanding of how what a recovering brain really needs. So we need science to advance this. This is not an accusation of anyone with a medical background. I just say, look, there's work to be done, okay? So let's just focus on our limitations and improve. So to repair the brain means you have to change its connectivity. This is a representation of the main nodes in a human brain. Every node reflects millions and millions of neurons with their interconnectivity. These are other kinds of things we do in the lab to try to understand how we can describe and analyze the human brain. But to fix a brain, and we know that already since the early 20th century, we have to change how brains are wired. So then the question becomes very concretely, okay, how do I now influence that process of wiring a brain? That's what you have to do. And moving my finger is not going to do that, okay? So this is the science we're about in specs is about how can I explain psyche. This is an old mosaic of psyche, or the psychological properties of our brain, from the perspective of a physical brain. This is a human brain that's about 80 billion or 90 billion neurons, and it weighs about 1.5 kilograms, and it can do amazing things. So we built theories for that. But we often lose sight, also in neuroscience, of what a scientific theory really means. A scientific theory really wants to explain natural phenomena. It wants to make predictions to be tested on its validity, and it wants to control. It wants to control reality in some form. Performing an experiment is you controlling reality. Okay, so these three factors are the core determinants of what makes a good scientific theory. All right? So that's what we try to do. And we have such a theory. It's called distributed adaptive control, and we're sort of working on this for the last 20 years, and the details don't really matter, okay? But the point is, we publish about it in the leading journals in neuroscience, okay? Like we are in Nature and in Neuron and whatever. We have an integrated theory about how we believe the brain works. This can all be wrong. That's good, right? Be wrong, be strong. In science, we learn by being falsified. So I'm not saying this is true with a big T. This is our best current guess about how we can think about the brain. But we use this theory now to make a very strong statement on how our intervention had to work. This is how we now used our science to build an intervention in the clinic. So an important aspect of our theory is that we are in some sense anti-reductionist. We follow Giambattista Vico, and this will become later also of some relevance, who actually, in debate with Descartes, proposed, look, let's forget reduction. That's not the way forward. Maybe we should focus on the things we can build. Maybe the things we can build are those things we can really understand. So this is an important aspect of our methodology. We built artificial systems like these robot systems, for instance, or neuroprosthetic systems, as ways to test our theory. And in the same way, we built RGS as a way to test that theory. So it's part of this synthetic method that is driving our science forward. And Vico is cool. Actually, if you think about it, the way Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA was exactly by following that method. They didn't write a bunch of equations that they solved. They had the workshop make metal plates of these shapes that they put together in different forms to explain the X-ray diffraction images generated by Rosalind Franklin. Okay? This is how they, in the end, understood the structure of DNA, by following the synthetic, by building their understanding, if you want. So we're following the same approach. So what did we do for RGS? Well, from the theory, we just a priori, so before seeing a single patient, we made a list. It's okay, if the theory is correct, then these are the kinds of things that must be included in our treatment. So that makes our approach deductive, right? We've derived from our theory strong predictions. And these are things like, well, you want it to be task-oriented. If you go to the clinic, the rule is repetitive training. Do the same thing a lot. We think it's a bad idea. Brains don't really like that. We think brains really like tasks and goals and rewards. Okay? Also, another aspect in the theory on the brain, we understand at least a little bit that you have to be sensitive to different learning systems in the brain. And these learning systems are sometimes in competition with each other. You must take this into account. All right? So the key point here is that the intervention we built was a direct expression of this scientific theory. So now, in testing this in the clinic, we're testing our theory. We do a form of deductive medicine. And that's where we want to get to. Okay? So that's how RGS was born from our science. We put now the interactive media together with the predictions from our theory on the protocol. Because again, the point, it's not the virtual reality as such. It's what you do with it. Okay? So that brought us to this technology. So RGS is essentially realized with off-the-shelf equipment. We have a motion capture system, essentially it's a Kinect. We have a touchscreen computer. We have removed these gloves because there are other ways for it, but we focus always on using off-the-shelf components while focusing all the effort on the software and the operating system behind it. And essentially, we built a rehabilitation operating system. So that brought us then to our commercial prototype, which now has to be seen by 200 patients in clinics or over 200 patients, and we have tested this on 50 people at home. All right. Just to show you that validation is key. Again, it's not to say like, oh, I programmed all this stuff and it looks really cool and it's awesome. It's not the way forward. You have to test this. Why is this awesome? Well, it works. So we're treating acute patients here. So this less than 3 weeks after the stroke. We have a control group, as you always do, and it's double blind. You have a control group that doesn't get RGS, and you have the experimental group. Here we look at their differences in motor scales, in functional scales. As always, we use all the standard scales used in the clinic worldwide to compare the impact of RGS on our patients, and we see that on these functional scales indicated with the stars, we have a significant difference after 12 weeks. So this shows for acute patients, you have more rapid recovery, right? The slope is steeper, but also to a higher level of functionality. And this impact on functionality is in a range that it really translates to impact in activities of daily living. So then we do the same thing, of course, with chronic patients. We also look at exoskeletons or rehabilitation robotics. We added here haptic feedback to the system. So we looked at different kinds of manipulations. Then I just have a really abstract representation because these curves here just display the number of clinical scales on which we have a significant positive effect. Okay, so you see here, after week 4 of training for all the chronic patients, we have a high impact. But you see in the follow-up, the 16-week follow-up, some patients in the haptic group are still improving. Extremely interesting for chronic patients. The other thing we see here is that actually the green line is the people working with the exoskeleton, and they perform the worst. And I think this is a strong argument to be extremely careful with rehabilitation robotics. I mean, rehabilitation robotics is seen as being really cool and expensive, but I think impact has not been shown yet. And again, here we see something similar. We can do better with simpler interventions. So then the impact. So here we have translated the idea via our science into a commercial prototype. We're very confident this works. We know this works. Okay, we've treated hundreds of people now. And many of them ask us, can I keep it? Because I like it, I want to have it. Okay, and then we have to say, sorry, we cannot do this yet. So how do we distribute this now? Right, this was the main point. We have this health crisis. We have something in our hands that we know works. It's cheap, okay, and it can just be distributed. So this is now what we have to do, right? We want to reach as many people as possible addressing this health crisis, but using a sustainable model, right? We cannot keep on bankrolling this from the research environment. It's just not working. So we have to find sustainability, and I want to close the science, innovation, commercialization loop, right? So these were the explicit targets of our commercialization. Okay, so there's no word here about profits, return on investment, or anything like this, because I think these things will sort of follow automatically if you do these things that matter right. We have built an integrated e-health solution because, of course, you have to think about your primary healthcare providers, the secondary healthcare providers, and so on. These are your standard e-health integration. That's all done. But the point is that I think a more fundamental question here is, do we need to advance health and quality of life via the known medical industrial complex? Is this really the model we have to follow? Because, again, I don't want to accuse anyone, but if we are facing a health crisis today, it has a lot to do with how we have organized health thus far. Okay? So to solve that is maybe not by just growing the same system to a larger scale. Maybe we should question some of its fundamentals, and I think we must, to solve this health crisis. And in our opinion, we have to rethink the notion of the patient. And certainly the chronic patient is not affected anymore by the medical system. So I think we have to rethink patients in this context more as users of a service, okay? They are empowered. We can empower them. We can also give them more autonomy than they have today, right? We can give them also more control over how they rehabilitate. So I see in our step towards commercialization, we really want to also question some of these fundamentals of the current healthcare system, because frankly, it doesn't work, okay? And we have to rethink this very carefully. That doesn't mean we can deny them, of course not. They're part of our reality. We have to work with them. But we have to also try to bypass it and empower the users. Because remember, this is a population of tens of millions. Okay, it's not a small group of people. We followed the standard road of creativity, right? We exposed ourselves to the domain of innovation, business development, just to learn. Is there a theory, as a scientist, you pose yourself, is there a theory of building a business? And then, of course, you have to discover that there is none. So we chewed on that for a while. So you see, since 2011, we're trying to make the commercialization a reality. So we won a few prizes for that. We got a lot of support from Juan and people here at the business school, which has been extremely helpful. We learned a lot from that. It has been very important for us. And now we have a mystery sponsor who is willing to invest in that startup. And in addition, we have identified a commercial partner who is very complementary with our objectives. So we think we have these two elements now sort of in place to make our next move. So for the discussion, then let me analyze a little bit how I see the strengths and weaknesses of what we're trying to achieve here. And let's see if we can learn, or you maybe have some solutions for me, right? So the point is, we are very different from a standard startup. We don't have a patent or an idea. That's awesome. We build it, we tested it, it exists, okay? In the research environment, we built the commercial prototype. It's there, it's used at home, ready to go, okay? Our challenge is more scale enlargement, business models, and so on, okay? Then we are leading the crowd, the pack, internationally, because this is the only approach that has science behind it. It has the clinical studies with sufficient subjects in it. So we've done our homework. Takes some time, but then you got something, right? And right now there's still little competition. I will say something more about that later. We have an identified market, the stroke patients, and their healthcare providers and their direct social environment of the patients. So we have an identified market and we have a team. So the team will be coming out of the SPECS research environment, the core team. Okay, these are people who are familiar with how we work, what we've done. I'm a scientist, so I stay in the academic environment. I have no idea about business. We have a business partner, we have an investor. Okay, so we believe our strength is that we have identified our product, our market, and we have a team. We're ready to go. But we have weaknesses. Oh, we're also grounded in a leading research group. And the point is, we have resources. And that's how we've been bankrolling the thing so far. And that's maybe also an alternative model of commercialization and innovation. Research environments, I think, can carry more of that burden. Well, they shouldn't, but if governments are lagging behind and business is lagging behind, we've got to do it ourselves. So we did it ourselves, okay? And this is possible. It's a model, but that we can think about a bit more. Weakness, capital to grow, go to different markets. It's clear this is a massive challenge. There is no recipe for success, right? Given our market, given our product, given the background, given where we want to go, it's not that you have sort of a business 101 guide that tells you, okay, now you should call this person and they will tell you what to do. We want to assure affordability for the user. This is supposed to be for everybody. Okay, but of course, this can be difficult because you have to think about, you know, hardware, distribution, support, and so on. So this will be a real challenge to deal with. You have a range of market scenarios, also given the range of users we have. There's something else to figure out. This relates a bit to this issue of the affordability. If you have this startup coming out of the research environment, how do you deal with, for instance, customer support? What do I know about customer support? Okay, I prefer often sort of to speak my mind to people, and then you're not supposed to do that. That's not customer support. And we haven't started yet. I see this as a real weakness. Right? We have to move. We cannot wait forever. We have to get into the world and meet our users. And this is an important point. I mean, I've done 15 Ironman races, and that's nothing special, but the point, it teaches you something important. Like the perfect race doesn't exist, and you got to train on the stuff you do wrong all the time. And I think this is an important attitude in building this. Like don't wallow in what you can do. It doesn't help you. You have to really understand what you cannot do, and this is hard. This is a hard exercise. So our opportunities is to generalize RGS. That means go outside of stroke. We're already doing experiments on this, so this is happening. Reach out internationally. Advance the research to support the protocols for the stroke patients. Advance our cause of deductive medicine. We really think we can do better in health if we base our interventions on a theory. That we have at least an idea of the causality of what we try to do. Because don't forget, evidence-based only means there's some correlation. I played Mozart to my patient and they felt better. That is evidence-based, but still it's not good enough. All right? We have to go to a deductive medicine if we want to deal with this health crisis. Our opportunity is to really have an impact on quality of life of many people and really have it at a very small scale, but we can do a lot better there. And I really believe we can build a different model of entrepreneurship that focuses more on impact and the relevance to society, and to extract your, if you want, satisfaction from that, as opposed to, let's say, the rush of generating money or whatever else might motivate people. I think this is a real driver for entrepreneurship we're not tapping into sufficiently. Okay? We're focusing too much on the economic factors. Well, I think the human condition and quality of life is our biggest challenge. So our threats, we have copycats. They read our papers, they program something. There's nothing behind it, right? So we have to deal with it. But our response is to actually release a free version of our system that includes all the functionality of our copycats. So we just kill their market, all right? I think this is a nice strategy. We have meddling institutions. I mean, what I see is that universities, the ones we have to deal with, really don't understand transfer, innovation. There are no models, there are no protocols, there are no rules. Everything depends on individual negotiations, and it's very intransparent. So with our host institution, we're now discussing for the last 3 years to come to an agreement. This is just not helping. It's really not good. It's not their fault, okay? It's the culture we're dealing with, but we have to improve that. So IP protection, I think the intellectual property of RGS cannot be protected through patents. Why inform my competitors? If no one wants to hold up my patent, who has the cash to hold up my patent when someone infringes them? We have to rethink this, how we defend. So we just move fast, okay? Because we think we can be fast. We have to watch out for creating unrealistic expectations in our users. right? Some stroke patients can just never fully recover. And we have to make sure we don't create these false hopes like, oh, now they're going to make me fly and they make me 30 years younger and so on. This is really an important threat that we have to mitigate. We have to collaborate with the medical industrial complex. On the other hand, the medical industrial complex can crush us very easily. So this is a balancing act that we have to perform. We have a range of business models and culture models to deal with. Here we operate in Spain, we talk to people in Germany, we talk to people in South America, right? That all bring different approaches to bear on how health is managed. And business appears risk-phobic. I see this really as a big threat and a big lesson of what I saw, talking with venture capitalists, potential companies and commercial partners. They seem to be only concerned about minimizing their risk. Well, you try to say, but look at the opportunity. So, oh yeah, but look, we might lose money in next month, right? I found this very surprising. I always believed that entrepreneurship was about this sort of adventurous spirit of attacking risk, you know, full front, but apparently not. Maybe I'm wrong, so you can educate me. But so I think we have to be able to accept risk here. So we want to get to our users as soon as possible. Our model has been to bankroll this whole thing from the research environment, which has worked for us to build the commercial prototype and bring us to where we are. But now we got to make the jump into a commercial method and find investors for that and supporters and a commercial context, which I hope we have achieved. And we have to realize a new model of innovation, which is the summary of what I tried to tell you, which I call Vico's loop. And this is also to sort of summarize a bit the whole adventure we had. I mean, you might be familiar with Stokes' model of innovation. It's a classic in innovation where you would say, look, if you look at how basic science relates to, let's say, applied science and innovation, actually you have different domains of activity in science, right? You have sort of your basic scientists like Bohr, who couldn't care less about whether stuff is useful. He just wants to understand fundamental principles of the universe. And on the other extreme, you would have Edison, who would not care about principles, but would just care about getting stuff to work, more an engineering can-do attitude towards building things. And then Pasteur, Louis Pasteur, which is sitting somewhere in between, trying to combine the idea of principles with application. Okay? So that's a nice idea, but I think it's not really reflecting the model we have followed. So our model looks more like this, where from our theory, combined with an idea, we build RGS, which is our application. But in the application, we are testing predictions from the theory, as I described to you, right? In those protocols are explicitly declared predictions derived from our theory on how I at least believe the brain works. So if stuff fails for the user at home, I'm learning something about the brain, okay? This might be unique for our activity and for this specific case of commercialization, but I don't think that's true. I think we can find that leverage in linking and finding these more close links between innovation, commercialization, and science than is happening so far. Often it goes out of the lab and bye-bye, we will not see this again. I think this is a mistake. We can have a synergy here and a positive feedback that I believe can be very powerful for innovation and also a motivator for research environments to really support innovation and transfer. So then also for us an important lesson is that, you know, money as such is just a means to an end. But the end of our whole operation is really the impact that we want to have with the science that we advance. And that impact we can only have through commercialization. So I showed you the idea, where it came from, building an exhibition. We combined it with our science to build the RGS technology. We're now at the threshold, right, to really bring this to the users in society. And the big opportunity I see here, and also the reality that I see in what we have created with RGS, is that I think we really can build the science and technology of well-being. We have to maybe also rethink a little bit what the objectives of science are. Is it still to understand what designs God followed in developing the universe? Is that all? Or should we maybe also think about, no, what are the fundamental principles that define well-being of humans, the human condition, our societies? Right? How do we frame these scientific challenges? And also there, I think scientists can maybe rethink a little bit impact. And there also, I think the European Commission is trying to influence that process a little bit. And I think, therefore, there's a lot to be gained, both for society and for science, through commercialization innovation, if we just think more about closing that loop, as opposed to keeping it separate. Thank you very much.